100.1 FM and AM 1020 KDKA. It's Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Talk, listen, and speak to the region's most influential leaders. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause.
Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. As we broadcast to you on KDKA, we thank everybody for continuing to tune in and listen. Zach Tanner is going to join us and kick us off and lead the show tonight. Zach is the president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. And Zach, welcome to another edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. I wanted to begin the show with you right at the top of the hour, because as we come on the air, we're getting later and later into the month of May, which puts this walkout, which started back in October, I guess on the doorstep of what would be 7 months now. Am I right with that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, exactly. Feels like it's been 7 years, but you're right. We're at 7 months now. Really proud of everybody that's, still on the line, still fighting. We're fighting a righteous cause for the future of the newspaper in Pittsburgh. But yeah, it's been a battle, hasn't it?
It certainly has. Zach, bring us into that battle. Let's get the listeners into the battle a little bit more. You are, as I mentioned, the president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. So day to day, probably hour by hour or minute by minute, your time is spent consumed in conversation with the great workers who are on the picket line, a lot of great tenure. Those workers represent a tremendous amount of tenure with the Post-Gazette. So I imagine the emotions are or vary, but it really must be a roller coaster ride depending on who you're talking to, which in turn makes it hard for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's like a really good point. A lot of the folks on the line are like veterans of the Post-Gazette, especially when we're looking at like our colleagues in the production and distribution parts of the company, those workers that are on strike. I mean, some of those guys have worked their entire careers at the Post-Gazette. We have some people in the newsroom and the Newspaper Guild, like Ed Blazina. He's been at the paper since the Pittsburgh Press. Back before that 92 strikes. We have people who've been here forever, and we have newer people too, people that are brand new in their career, and kind of everybody in between. And that leads to like a wide range of emotions every day. And you're exactly right. I mean, like, it's a big toll on everybody. It's a big mental strain. Everybody's kind of working to fight. Like, being on strike is a lot more stressful than going to work is, believe it or not. And we all know that work can be like a really stressful thing. It's stressful to pay your bills and make your rent and your mortgage and all of that. But then when you kind of take charge to fight to make sure that those bills are going to be able to be paid and your health care is going to be covered, you're kind of taking your future and your colleagues' future into your own hands. And I think everybody's feeling that 7 months in. So yeah, there's a roller coaster every day. And I mean, that's why it's important to like keep focused on the goal of like winning the strike and getting back to work, winning health care for all 5 striking unions, and getting the fair stay in our workplace back via like the guild's contract that the company took away back in 2020.
I don't know if this is I hope you don't mind me asking this question, but I'll ask you directly. How you holding up? I mean, you're the top of the pyramid, and in a lot of ways, you become, I would imagine, a chameleon. You remain on point, but you have to adapt to individual scenarios. But at the end of the day, you're the leader that your coworkers are going to turn to, and I imagine that's that's not easy either.
No, it's not. And I mean, that was another good point there, that like kind of, you're going to have to be variable depending on which one of your colleagues you're talking to, which person in union leadership you're talking to. It's a lot. I'm holding up just fine. This is really hard on everybody. I think when I wake up in the morning and start working on whether it's healthcare proposals or contract comparisons, like proposal comparisons, I'm keeping in mind everybody that's out there fighting, like all 100 of us that are still on strike and still fighting this fight. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people out there that are going to be more stressed out than I am, going to have, some hardships, and so, keeping everybody in mind, it's a fight of 100 here. And that's why, it's critical that like our Strike Solidarity Fund keeps getting donations into it. It's why, we have some fundraisers coming up at like some more social halls, and that's going to be like a great opportunity for everybody to get together and see each other, talk to each other in a scenario that's not just like on the picket line, working for the union progress, a little more casual setting. And that's good because, we need everybody healthy and ready to fight and feeling good.
We're talking with Zach Tanner, president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. You're listening, of course, to Today in Pittsburgh Labor, and you're listening here live on KDKA. We thank everybody for tuning in, as we always do every week. Our audience continues to grow on KDKA, and I think the one element of Today in Pittsburgh Labor, call it one leg of the bar stool in terms of why this show exists, is to try and educate the listening audience who may or may not be familiar with what it means to be on strike and to be in a position like the workers are in. Zach, what has been the support from the community? My sense, and I don't know if this is right, but my sense just from doing this radio show is that support continues to grow from all sides. 300 and if there's 360 degrees of support would be perfect. There's 359 degrees of support now. The only one we're missing is the ownership, the Block Communications, the owner, the owner of the paper. Yeah. I wish it was a little bit easier to get them to join our cause, right? We would have avoided this whole mess over the past 7 years. No, community support's been fantastic. I mean, it's really inspiring to kind of see workers all across the city, all across the region kind of come together to support each other. We've gotten financial support from different unions across Western Pennsylvania, not just in Pittsburgh, all the way from Pittsburgh to Butler to Beaver. So that's really been encouraging. Like, those folks have been tremendous to us. We've stood side by side on some of the picket lines with like Starbucks workers here in Pittsburgh. And those are just some of like the best, most fired up workers that I've come across over in the Pittsburgh Starbucks area. They're really leading the charge nationwide there even. So yeah, community support's been fantastic. It's really great standing with workers, standing together. We all have our fights. We all have our battles. And then when we come together, that's how we win them, right? The many hands make light work in a way. And I think that's applicable here. We just need to figure out a way to get those Block brothers to join the cause too. And if you or anybody has any ideas on how to move them, I'm all ears, because we've been fighting for 7 months now. It's an interesting reference to the support of the Starbucks workers. And a few weeks back on Today in Pittsburgh Labor, we had a conversation about Starbucks. We had a conversation with the organizer who has been leading that charge, and there's a parallel there, because I think that what's in front of us is a wide range of age groups, as you mentioned once already tonight. You've got the tenured veterans, generational workers who have been part of the paper and the audience that consumes that, and then you have the younger generation now starting to gauge and understand and realize the value of what it means to have representation.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's something that's like becoming crystal clear to people as they enter the workforce now. I mean, I think like there's, especially when like you're online, you're terminally online, you're always kind of reading, jokes about different generations and things like that. I think the joke of like the generation that's like entering the workforce now, like these Zoomers, they're kind of coming in seeing how poorly everybody's been mistreated over the years, and they're kind of putting their foot down and going like, no more of this. Like we're not going to tolerate this. And I think like that really resonates with a lot of people across the different generations. Like I'm a millennial, and when I came into the workforce, it was right after like the 2008 recession, right after all that market crash, and corporations were treating workers like dirt in the name of profit. That's really when a lot of the problems with the Post-Gazette started, although I wasn't going to be there for another 6 years at that point. But yeah, I think it's resonating all the way from like the youngest generation up to the oldest generation still working. It's kind of an inspiration to fight back, an inspiration to say like no more give backs in our contracts, no more bad treatment from management. Like we want to stay in our workplace, and we want it to be a fair stay and a healthy workplace for everybody.
Zach Tanner, president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh, kind enough to join us here and give us some great opening remarks here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor as we broadcast to you on KDKA. We'll take a short commercial break. Back in a moment.
We are going on strike because of unfair labor practices, where the company literally canceled the health care.
Being a mom on strike and being a single mom on strike to 2 young kids, it's very nerve-wracking, a little bit stressful. I'm doing my best to look at it as everything will work out, and I gotta just trust the situation, but it's very nerve-wracking.
I'm a mailer in the mailroom, been an employee here for 28 years. I'm a third-generation employee. Between my grandpa, my dad, and me, we have close to, if not more than 100 years of loyal employment with this company. You can call the Post-Gazette and tell them you do not want to have a paper delivered. You do not want a paper delivered until this labor dispute is finalized and settled.
And welcome back, everyone, to Today in Pittsburgh Labor. I know that when I went into the commercial break, I said goodbye to Zach Tanner, who is the president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. But then in conversation while you were listening to a commercial break, Zach and I had a conversation on just some meaningful potential updates. And Zach, thank you for staying with me. I want to update everyone, the entire audience, on what's happening. I think what you're about to say at least validates initially that the law is now, or what was previously ruled in support of the striking workers, is now, the law is now starting to put some strength or some teeth behind it with what's happening. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So just a little bit of backstory. The Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh, we had a set of charges against the Post-Gazette filed with the National Labor Relations Board. That included bad faith bargaining, illegal imposition of work rules, a couple other things. That went before an administrative law judge back in September and October of 2022. And then in January of 2023, the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh won that case. We overwhelmingly got a positive ruling that we're still working through. But just this past week, there was one pending bad faith bargaining charge against one of the Teamster locals that represents workers at the Post-Gazette. That charge was actually dropped this week, which means that now there are 0 charges against unions at the Post-Gazette. While at the same time, the 4 production unions at the Post-Gazette, 2 Teamster locals and 2 CWA locals, they have hearings scheduled now on their bad faith bargaining charges against the Post-Gazette, directly related to the health care bargaining in September and October of 2022 that led to this strike. So this is, in my opinion, kind of like a one day longer, one day stronger situation. This signals that there's movement happening at the federal level to rectify the illegal actions that the Postal Gazette have taken over the past several years and the illegal actions that led to this strike back in October. So I think it's really positive news. It's really good to see the NLRB moving in that direction.
Now, let me ask you this. I want to make sure that I'm accurate with this, but will this now prevent the attorneys representing Block Communications from further delaying these hearings? I know that over the course of the last, call it 9 or 10 weeks since we've been talking about it here on KDKA, I know that there have been times when the attorneys have just artificially either created a roadblock or didn't even bother to show up for what would have been a scheduled hearing.
Yeah. So the company's attorneys are really good at doing things like that. Now, sadly, a little bit of labor history that I'm sure you and a lot of the listeners are aware of, the National Labor Relations Board is just a dramatically underfunded piece of the federal government, and that's why we need legislation like the PRO Act and all that, higher funding for the National Labor Relations Board. Because the National Labor Relations Board is so understaffed, these hearings aren't scheduled for like September and October. So they're still a little ways away. I think there's one in July. So the hearings themselves are a little ways away, but moving these charges forward, scheduling these hearings, coupled with the Newspaper Guild's administrative law judgment last year, I think all kind of packages things together to be a really good sign. So we might not necessarily be sitting around, twiddling our thumbs until July, September, October. I think there's going to be like a lot of leverage that these give us at the bargaining table to have the company actually show up and actually bargain. These are major movements here that give the workers that are on strike tons of leverage. The NLRB needs more funding, but we have a lot of leverage in the meantime.
Well, good stuff and great to hear. I mean, as we broadcast and come to you, and Zach, as you and I talk here in what is essentially a week before Memorial Day weekend. So, if my math is somewhat close to being accurate, perhaps you're 6 to 8 weeks rather, away from that possibility if it were to come up in July. So still a lot of time to either potentially get something done or to continue, as you mentioned in our first segment, continue to rally and continue to extract support for those that are on strike through fundraising, just to get them to get to the finish line, so we can get a positive outcome here.
Yeah, that's right. I think, like I said, we have so much leverage now. Like the wave of momentum has just been building in our favor ever since the strike began. I think that's going to continue with all of this. So I'm feeling really good. Hopefully 6 to 8 weeks hopefully we look back on that and go, oh, we laugh about how long we thought that was going to be, and maybe we can use this wave to get things moving even sooner.
Zach Tanner, I will officially now say goodbye, Zach, but thank you for coming back after the break. Zach Tanner is the president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh, and he leaves us tonight off the show, and he leaves us at least with what I feel to be signs of hope that staying true to what you believe and fighting through adversity collectively as a union, operating as one, will get you to the finish line. You just got to stay true to what you believe, and we'll get there. Zach, appreciate it very much, man. Thanks for coming on and staying with us here in the second segment.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, good stuff. That's Zach Turner, the president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. This is Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We'll take a break. Back in a moment.
Pittsburgh is a union town, so when the owners of the Post-Gazette hire out-of-town lawyers to try to break our unions, we don't back down. Workers at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette are on strike, and we need your support. We're the ones who design, print, and distribute the paper, sell ads, handle accounts, and create Pulitzer Prize-winning journalism. We help our neighbors stay informed day in and day out. But we haven't had a raise in over 15 years. And the owners of the paper, Block Communications, illegally cut our health care. We deserve better. We deserve respect. Please keep our strike strong and show the Millionaire Block family we're not alone. If you subscribe to the paper, cancel your subscription. If you read stories online, don't visit the site until the strike is resolved. Support our strike. Drop the Post-Gazette. Visit ppgstrike.org.
Paid for by the Communications Workers of America.
And back here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor, as we broadcast to you on KDKA, we thank everybody for tuning in, and we certainly thank Zach Tanner for joining us as part of our discussion this week on the continuing to keep you updated on the Post-Gazette strike. My conversation with Zach forced me into a pivot for the show, and our next guest was gracious enough to accept the baton from this old guy and say, yeah, I'll come on. Joe Pass is the attorney. The firm has a long history of representing labor unions. The firm is Jubelirer, Pass, and Intrieri, and he joins us now on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Joe, thanks for letting me call an audible, and thanks for giving me a few minutes, man. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for giving us the time. We appreciate that.
No doubt about it. I wanted to get the legal perspective and the legal understanding of what just occurred, and you'll be able to do that for the listening audience. Zach Tanner, in our last segment, had mentioned two different rulings that had just come down. One was I'll start with and correct me wherever I'm wrong in presenting this, but the first was a bad faith bargaining claim issued against one of the unions on strike, and the ruling that came down revoked that or threw it away or tossed it out, and eliminating that claim. Am I saying that right?
Yes, you're saying it right, but it's actually the Post-Gazette had filed 4 different complaints, one against each of the 4 unions, the Teamsters, the Mailers, the Pressmen, and the Typos. And then all 4 have been rejected by the regional director, finding no merit in any bad faith bargaining on behalf of those unions. That's the first ruling.
Now that means, so what does that mean? The ruling is I don't know if victory might not be the right word, but the ruling is in favor now, and sets up what for you?
Well, then 2 things. Of course, they can appeal that to the regional, to the board in Washington. But on the basis of the information which the region has discovered, I'm confident that their appeal will be unsuccessful. Then the second, what happened is the region has issued 4 new complaints against the Post-Gazette by each union, alleging that they bargained in bad faith throughout the entire negotiation process by insisting on proposals that no one would accept. Proposals such as, we'll give you health care, which is twice as cost of what you're currently paying, but we can revoke it at any time after we give it to you. So it's like, here, we have it, now you're going to take it away. And they had that's on all of their proposals. They maintain the right to revoke their health care, retain the right to revoke some wages if they wanted to, retain the right to revoke your pension contributions, your sick leave, and just a variety of different things that are important. Everything that they were trying to propose, they had hooks in it that they could revoke. Then came the health care dispute, and it's now bubbled over to the work stoppage. And in that case, the board has found preliminarily in their charges that the employer bargained in bad faith by refusing to allow the employees to continue with their health care, insisting on only the only agreement they would ever agree to is one they proposed, which was draconian. So that's where we are, and we'll be going to trial on all of those. And I'm very confident we'll be successful because it's the same conduct they engaged in with regards to the guild. And, of course, the administrative law judge has already found that conduct to be bad faith bargaining.
And, Joe, by board, when you reference board, just for clarity for the listening audience, the National Labor Relations Board is who's issuing the ruling. And I guess, and this is where you could say, Joe, you're right, or Joe, you're wrong, meaning me. I guess at least with symbolism, and perhaps more than that, it allows you to now be able to have some, is it teeth in the law, or it allows you to be able to move forward and at least gives you, if not a direct advantage, it now at least gives you the ability to leverage with bargaining. Is that a fair statement, or we're not there yet?
Well, let's put it this way. If I were dealing with an employer that wants to make a deal, and I mean wants to make a deal on fair terms, I would say it would be great leverage. Mm-hmm. But with this employer, it means nothing to them in the sense that they will appeal all of these decisions. Eventually, we're going to wind up successfully, but it's unfortunately maybe a long way off. Nevertheless, we are also seeing if the Labor Board would seek injunctive relief right now to require them to comply with these conditions while the litigation goes on. That's a separate issue. We haven't had any confirmation one way or the other, but we are trying to request that kind of relief.
Joe Pass joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. One last thought or one last question for you, Joe, before I let you go. I mentioned right when you came on to kick off the segment your long history of representing labor unions, which means that in my mind, you've been through every conceivable thing that could possibly come down the pike. Is that still accurate, or are there things that you haven't seen yet from the Post-Gazette side that might continue to move this forward? Or put the brakes on trying to move it forward, I should say.
My career in labor management now is like 55 years, and I can say this with all honesty. I've represented unions in at least 26 different states and different disputes, one way or the other. This is by far the worst people I've ever dealt with, without any question. In fact, I can't even think of the second person. There's no one who even compares to the intransigence and the refusal to bargain in good faith, and simply wants to try and destroy the union like this group. They are hell-bent on just trying to destroy the union and the employees that work there, which makes no sense. I mean, when I think about the history I had with the Post-Gazette for many, many years, we were very cooperative with them over the years, going back to 1970. There wasn't ever we had any disputes. And even when they started having problems, and we understood they had problems in the early 2000s, we gave them over $100 million in concessions, really, just to help them along. And now we're treated like this, where they won't pay $19 a week so people can have health insurance. I mean, come on.
There's a difference. This is a different branch of the family, Joe.
Exactly. It is a different branch of the family. Bill Block is rolling in his grave. He was anything but what these people are. Anything. The antithesis of them. They're on the South Pole and he's on the equator. That's the difference.
Joe Pass, the attorney with a long tenure and a long history of representing labor unions. Jubelirer, Pass, and Intrieri joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor here on KDKA. Joe, appreciate you coming on, man. Anything you need, we're the voice, we're the platform. We'll continue to provide that. Anything you need, just feel free to reach out.
Thank you very much. I appreciate talking.
All right, that's good stuff. That's Joe Pass joining us here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We'll take a commercial break. We'll finish it up on the other side. Back in a moment.
Hey, is that?
Yep, the Post-Gazette workers' picket line. They're on strike.
Oh, yep, I know. I already canceled my subscription to support the workers, and I am not reading the Post-Gazette website either.
Right, me too, and I canceled my business's advertising.
You know, I'd go on strike too if my company cut my health care.
Right, and no raises for 15 years? Crazy.
Yeah, seriously.
Those guys who own the paper are worth millions.
I heard that they hired some out-of-town law firm to negotiate with the workers.
Yeah, I heard they're trying to break the unions.
Doesn't sound like they understand Pittsburgh at all.
Exactly. Pittsburgh is a union town.
Yeah, this place was built on unions.
Yeah, it's about showing respect and doing what's right.
Please keep our strike strong and show the Millionaire Block family we're not alone. Drop the Post-Gazette. Visit ppgstrike.org to join us.
Paid for by the Communications Workers of America.
And back here on Today in Pittsburgh Labor with J-Doc and Krause. Special thanks to Joe Pass for joining us in the last segment, and also Zach Tanner for kicking off the show today on Today in Pittsburgh Labor. We're into, as I've said, a week away from Memorial Day, getting into what is almost 7 months. Ed Mooney, who joins us every week just to kind of give us a fast update if there's anything to update from District 213, the District 213 Vice President. Ed, we got some good news today from that Zach Tanner shared with us, and then Joe Pass elaborated on it a little bit. The complaints, 4 different complaints ruled on and issued, or complaints issued, ruled on by the NLRB for the Post-Gazette negotiating in bad faith, one of them being around the health care. So as Joe said, I'm sure they'll appeal, but that at least represents some teeth in the law as you continue to fight this battle to get closure on this strike.
Yep, that is good news. And the only thing we can hope is when they copy the owners on these decisions, that the owners begin to realize that these lawyers are taking them down a path that they don't want to be on. They're paying the attorneys millions and millions of dollars to orchestrate this war against our workers, which is completely unnecessary. And as they can see again now, as they did to them before in Toledo, they're leading them down the wrong path. They're going to pay on both ends of it. And these attorneys need to go, and the company needs to send somebody to a bargaining table that has a responsibility to settle these contracts, and also that actually cares about the quality journalism in the city of Pittsburgh at the Post-Gazette.
And how about this, Ed? Actually cares about the people. Does that ever factor into the equation, or not really?
Well, not if they still have these attorneys there. These attorneys don't care about anybody but themselves. And all of their actions have proven that. And even as recently as when we pointed out to them how they could deduct health care costs pre-taxed when they were saying they couldn't, they don't even acknowledge when they screw it up. They always blame it on somebody else. So until they get rid of those attorneys, save themselves all the money they're paying those attorneys, and put somebody who's responsible at the table who actually cares about the employees and the reputation of this newspaper, this struggle will continue. And if they think that the community, the labor community in the Pittsburgh, the customers in the Allegheny County area are going to walk away from these workers and walk away from this fight, they are sadly mistaken. They have proven over and over again their eternal commitment to this struggle, because they do care about the workers at the Post-Gazette, because they are their families, friends, and neighbors who they've been living next to and their children went to school with for decades. So ultimately, we believe that the community support and the labor support will win out, and the people there who still want quality journalism, even if it's in a digital environment, you can't have a digital newspaper without the journalists. So sooner or later, the owners need to get this message, get it through their heads that they have been sold a bill of goods, end that bill of goods agreement with those attorneys, and put a responsible person at the table who is from the Allegheny County area, and also, while we're at it, a responsible person at the table up in Toledo, where you can see, while they're not on strike, the same problems are playing out with the contracts and with those employees there.
Give me somebody responsible at the table, and you'll get you'll get to a point where you can either agree to disagree, but you'll find common ground that's for the good of all. Ed Mooney joining us here from District 213 Vice President. We're all lined up behind you, Ed, as you continue to move forward, man. I appreciate it very much.
We appreciate, and we appreciate the support from all these workers, from the Teamsters, the CWA, and the Guild, with the continuing community support and the outpouring of donations to keep them afloat. We'll continue this battle, and we will win in the end.
Great stuff. Ed Mooney joining us here to close us out here on this edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. I'll leave you with this. Don't forget to go to unionprogress.com. That's the strike paper, the digital strike paper, unionprogress.com. And if you're listening tonight on KDKA, one Sunday away from Memorial Day weekend, you can, on unionprogress.com, you'll find an opportunity where you can support these great workers. That's going to do it for this edition of Today in Pittsburgh Labor. Until next time, until we connect again, I'm Joe Kraus. In solidarity, everybody.